Hi, it's vegan personal trainer and nutritionist Paul from Hench Herbivore with the latest in my Q&A series. For the chance to get your question answered in the next of these videos, comment down below. James Hoffman asks, if you're vegan to be healthy, why not consume egg whites for better absorption of protein and still no fat or cholesterol? Well, for one thing, egg whites contain zero fiber. Fiber is the substrate that feeds our healthful Prevotella strains of bacteria. There is only animal protein there which feeds pathogenic gut bacteria. Now this is very, very important because the vast majority of the genes that control our metabolic processes, 99+%, belong to bacteria. Which types of gut bacteria do you want responsible for the metabolic processes that are responsible for our health and longevity? This is deadly important. Choose wisely. Animal products are also high in advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These toxins accelerate the aging process throughout every tissue of our body, including muscle tissue. They cause cross-linking of proteins, which leads to dysfunction and, over time, sarcopenia or muscle wastage, and also drive a host of killer diseases. Lastly, I'd speak to the nutritional profile. Now, while egg whites have a good amount of all the essential amino acids, in terms of vitamins per 20 grams of egg whites, which is about 6 total egg whites, you've got about 62% of your vitamin B2 for the day, but virtually nothing other than that. Minerals wise, again, really low in minerals. You've got 67% of your selenium, 20% of your sodium, virtually nothing else. Now, if we look at 20 grams of protein from lentils, you've got about 220 grams of cooked lentils for this. B1, 31%, B2, 13%, B3, 15%, B5, 28%, B6, 31%. All your folate for the day, and then a tiny little bit of vitamins C, E, and K. In terms of minerals, this is pretty astonishing. 4% of your calcium, not a huge amount, but a lot more than you'd get in an egg white. 62% of your copper, 93% of your iron, 19% magnesium, 48% manganese, 57% phosphorus, 18% potassium, 11% selenium, 35% sodium, and 26% of your zinc for the day. The more of these plant-based nutrients that we can get into our bodies, the longer and happier and healthier we will live. Christine Benson asks, I'm currently quite overweight, have no idea what to do in the gym. Googling it just made it confusing as there's so much info out there, and it stalled my confidence to begin exercising. What should I do? Of course, there are many, many ways to attack this. If you want my perspective, what I tend to prescribe for a beginner, 3 cardio sessions a week, augmented with 3 resistance training sessions a week, perhaps a day rest or a day active recovery, which means you're going for a long leisurely walk or a gentle swim, something like that. In terms of cardio, while anaerobic training is more effective, i.e. high intensity interval training, it's no good for a beginner. We need to build up an aerobic base. So I would recommend, pick a modality that you enjoy, either on foot, on your bike son, rowing machine, whatever you like to do. If it's of lower intensity, perhaps power walking, I would say to aim to get up to 60 to 90 minutes. Don't kill yourself the first time out, ease into it, but on a weekly basis, build on your successes. If you're gonna be more high intensity, e.g. something like jogging, then maybe 20 to 45 minutes may be a better cap. If possible, I'd program your resistance training on alternate days. Either repeat a full body session 3 times a week, or a way I particularly like to do it is split the body into whole body push and whole body pull, and alternate your resistance training sessions like that. On the push day, you'll be training chest, shoulders, triceps, quads, calves. Put in your compounds first, chest presses, shoulder presses, squat variations. Then moving on to your isolations like chest fly, side raise, leg extensions, and calf raises. On pull day, you'll be training back, traps, rear delts, biceps, hamstrings, perhaps a little bit of core as well. Exercises will be the myriad of pull-ups, pull-downs and rows, rear delt flies, biceps curls, hamstring curls, and then perhaps tack a little general core work onto the end. Things like plank or rollouts for the transverse abdominis, the deep-seated muscles. If you want to, a bit of leg or knee raises, crunches, perhaps some twisting, so you bring a bit of obliques in there if you want to. If yourself or anyone else out there wants more personalised help, I do offer nutrition and workout plans. Hit me up at henchherbivore@yahoo.co.uk. Long-term subscriber Bohemian B, cutting and bulking do's and don'ts. Just for anyone unfamiliar with the lingo, cutting is gym speak for dieting and bulking is gym speak for muscle building. Number one, I'd say don't be in a rush. In the past, I'd get in too much of a deficit and I'd burn off muscle as well as fat. And when bulking, I'd be again in such a rush that I'd overeat calories in an attempt to grow muscle faster. But of course, you're then going to put a bit of extra fat on. So on a cut, 250 to 500 calorie deficit for most people is about optimal. That's half a pound to a pound fat loss a week. If you're extremely obese, maybe you can get away with more like 2 pounds lost per week. In terms of bulking, it's quite difficult because if you overeat, you're going to put slop on. If you undereat, you're going to retard your progress. For a beginner, I tend to aim for about a 250 calorie surplus day. Protein recommendations according to the best available science, perhaps 1.6 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilo body weight for a bulk, and more like 2 grams of protein per kilo body weight on a cut. On a cut, less calories, you want to fill yourself up. So I really emphasize lots of low calorie vegetables, and I'll often switch my grain out for a tuber such as potatoes, sweet potatoes. Calorie for calorie, you're going to get a lot more volume in your tummy. On a bulk, although we still want to eat healthily, it's getting the calories in, so more calorie dense foods. Emphasize your legumes, your grains, tropical and dried fruits. Tofu is great, it's lost some of the minerals, but it's still quite healthful, lower in fiber, so you can get more calories in. Smoothies are a good option too, particularly if you want to add 1 or 2 scoops of protein powder to your diet. A good strategy is to eat slightly higher amounts of fats. In terms of health, the doctors that are preventing, treating and reversing disease, the plant-based doctors advocate around 10% of your calories from fats or so. Most often do, some go a little bit higher. The ones reversing disease, about 11% of your calories from fats. But if you are going to go higher fat, then choose the more healthful ones: nuts, seeds, avocado. Crispin says, do you take any medications when you're ill, e.g. ibuprofen, paracetamol or antibiotics? If not, what is a good alternative if you're really unwell? So I try my level best to avoid them. It's rare that I'll need anything like that now. But if we were to take non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, as an anti-inflammatory, the trouble is it kills our healthful gut bacteria. So that's a really, really terrible thing, because as I alluded to earlier, that's really the linchpin of our health. It's a cornerstone. We need those to be optimal. The whole foods plant-based diet in general is very anti-inflammatory anyway, but if you find you have got a bit of a headache or stomach upset, sometimes things like turmeric, particularly ginger, very anti-inflammatory. Another thing you can consider, and I meant to pick it up before I started yapping, is this CBD oil. Of late, this supplement has really taken the world by storm. It's such a powerful anti-inflammatory. If you want to give this stuff a try, I am a brand ambassador with Honest Hemp. If you check down below, there'll be a link and there's codes. First time buyers get 30% off, that's huge. Subsequent purchases, 15% still as well. So it's one of the cheaper ways you'll ever get it. In terms of antibiotics, again, as I keep saying, gut microbiome health is vital. If you stick antibiotics down there, they kill just about everything. They'll probably kill nearly all of your good guys. Some of the bad guys are antibiotic resistant. So you then selecting for those, they're going to kind of take hold, and you're going to have pathogenic strains of bacteria in charge in your gut. You really don't want that unless you can help it. Sometimes we need some powerful antibiotics if we've got a terrible infection or something. Well, then that's just the way it is. An alternative before things get too bad is targeted and natural antimicrobials. So I had SIBO a while back, which is small intestine bacterial overgrowth, where some of the bacteria that live in the colon make it through the ileocecal valve into the small intestine, causes all sorts of problems. Now I took allicin, which is a compound out of garlic. I took berberine, which is from berries. Also took grapeseed extract. Waiting to have tests done to confirm, but it feels like it did the job. Mike James asks, do vegans have less chance of getting flu or cold? When is the last time you had a flu or cold? I haven't had one in over a year. Yeah, happily, I can't remember the last time. If I do get them now, I don't generally get much in the way of symptoms, certainly don't get a snotty nose, etc. like I used to. I think a lot of that is down to dairy. The most I really get is kind of just a feeling of lethargy for like 2 or 3 days, and then it's pretty much gone. Maybe a little scratch in the throat, which tells me, this is a virus. If people are a junk food vegan, probably get no real benefit over eating a sort of a standard Western diet, with animal products and processed junk in there. If we're eating vast majority of whole plant foods, your legumes, whole grains, fruit, veg, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices, all those antioxidants, all those phytonutrients, vitamins, minerals, you're going to be so well protected. You are going to notice most probably a huge benefit in terms of not getting as many viruses. The one thing I will say is if you skimp on sleep, leaves you open to viruses. It's probably one of the worst things actually, so make sure you're getting your sleep. Plain Ranger asks, where do you get your blood analysed? I'm 17 years old, would be interested as I've never had my blood work tested. Keep up the awesome work, I like you. So you can get tests done online. They're relatively expensive. They don't test like a whole panel of things really. I've not seen many really very good tests. Perhaps, sort of the important lipid profile like total cholesterol, LDL, things like that. And the odd vitamin and mineral, but not really a good sort of panel. The way I got it done a couple of times is I went to my doctors, said, I've recently gone onto a vegan diet. You can maybe say, I'm feeling a little tired, or so I'm worried that something's off in my nutrition. And twice that has worked, and I've got all my bloods done. And there was quite a bit of detail in there. So that was in Britain on the NHS. So obviously we don't pay for that. Ethical Vegan asks, what's the best exercise for women for growing the glutes? Squat variations are good. Deadlifts are okay. Hip thrusters are number one. If you're lucky enough, like me, your gym may have a specific station for this piece of equipment. If you have to do it makeshift, you basically need to put a bench long ways behind you and have it secured so it's not going to move. You basically sit on the floor in front of the bench, barbell across your lap, preferably with a bit of padding or a towel to protect your hip bones. And then you're basically going to push your hips up so your knees are at a right angle, your body's here, the barbell's there. So you're basically pushing your bum up and down and lifting the bar in that manner. If you want that bubble butt, then you can put an exercise band around your knees when you're doing your squats, when you're doing your hip thrusters. You could even add in a little bit of higher rep leg abduction. So you've got the machines where you push your knees apart, or you're laying on your side with an ankle weight, something like that. Or you can use like a low pulley with an ankle strap. This is going to take a minute, please bear with me. Sigurd Geir Arnarsson. How do you deal with the social isolation of being vegan? For instance, I eat with my family every Christmas and now I hate Christmas. I feel your pain. A few Christmases ago, my partner Gemma and myself were at her dad's house. Her brother was there. We're having a lovely day. Came meal time and we both saw what's on their plates. We both had a flash of how that has to be processed to end up on the plate. And it really hit us, it really hurt us, and we both said, should we go for a walk? And pretty much at the same time we both said, I'm never sitting with a meat eater again. Of course, we want to spend time with our families where possible. If they're quite able to talk about these things, perhaps you could negotiate that they don't eat animal products at that time, or perhaps you come over before or after they eat, or you go out while they eat and eat your own foods, maybe in another room or something. Maybe the answer is as simple as that, and you say to them, I'm not trying to hurt you, but this really makes me sad to see because I've seen how that happens. And if they're reasonable, which all of us should be, hopefully they'd understand. There's been one little drawback of saying we'll never eat with meat eaters, and that's the fact that you can't then be a positive influence. If you've got all the good fruits and vegetables, things going on, you've got a real colourful meal, perhaps it's really fragrant, smells delicious, that can be a way of activism. We'll call it snacktivism. Maybe you bring extra food for people to try as well. That can be a good way of encouraging people, towards a plant-based diet. And in terms of friends, one thing that Gem and I did was to make friends with a lot of vegans. Happily for us in Norwich, there's a vegan meetup group, so very quickly our circle of friends widened. And I'd say that we're a lot more kind of socially active now, and we really enjoy being, with these like-minded people. If you've not got a meetup group where you live, you need to be the one to start it. THM says, tell us your opinion about coconut, please, because of the saturated fats that people complain about all the time. Is it really that bad? Because I mean, it's coconut, not something industrialized. First off, not everything from nature is healthful. For instance, there's cyanide in some foods. According to the science, a little whole coconut in an otherwise whole foods, plant-based diet, kind of lower fat, doesn't seem to be at a risk. Coconut oil, total other thing. So in terms of raising your risk for coronary artery disease, like the #1 killer of humans, beef tallow is, beef fat is bad, coconut oil is worse, and then butter, is worse still. And then when you superheat butter, like they clarify ghee in Indian cooking, oxidizing it, that's super, super bad. Clever marketers will tell you that coconut oil is healthy because it contains medium chain triglycerides, which are healthful, or at the very least like a fraction as unhealthy as the long chain triglycerides that we know gives you heart disease. What they don't tell you is it's nearly all saturated fat. 8% of it is those medium chain. 92% are the long chain triglycerides that do kill us. Coconut milk and coconut based yogurts are not going to be as bad as oil, but a lot of the fats are kind of separated, they're not attached to the fiber anymore, so I seek to avoid these altogether. Typically for my overt fats, I choose nuts and seeds, sometimes a little bit of avocado, and very rarely a little fresh coconut flesh or a little desiccated coconut, on a dessert or something like that. Thomas has got a good question. Do you think that carnivores are blowing anti-nutrients out of proportion? Seems like every carnivore video I watch is just harping on about anti-nutrients. Well, first off, as I always speak to, despite eating a completely whole foods plant-based diet, when I have my bloods drawn, all my vitamins and minerals read bang at the top of range, so they don't seem to be affecting me at least. So when we say anti-nutrients, we're talking about the odd compound in plant foods that can, for instance, rob our body of minerals. Things like lectins, phytates, and oxalates. Now, certain of these compounds, like lectins, are virtually destroyed by cooking, so they have no concern. In the case of phytates, yes, when we first heavily increase our whole plant foods consumption, there will be a little bit of a negative. However, very quickly, the science has now shown that we actually have metabolic adaptations, and in fact, they help us to absorb more minerals. Some people are actually saying that phytates need to be reclassified as the next vitamin. Now, food is a package deal, and while animal products come with a small array of different vitamins and minerals, sometimes in high quantities, but only, a small number of different ones, Harvard found that on average vegetables have 16 times more nutrition than meat. So while you're getting the negatives with the animal products, fat, trans fats, cholesterol, antibiotics, all the list of negatives as long as your arm, when we eat the plant foods, we're getting possibly, experts predict, 100,000 beneficial compounds. Animal products, a lot of negatives, very little positive. Plant products, a lot of benefits, a tiny amount of potential slight negatives. If we look at real world application, for instance, the Global Burden of Disease study, which is the largest ever study on lifestyle nutrition, it found the one thing that the most centenarian rich populations had in common was that they all ate legumes, beans, split chickpeas, lentils, chickpeas, etc. They found that for every 2 tablespoons of legumes, that's 20 grams, and 8% less chance of an early death. So don't get stuck in reductionist science that just looks at one tiny aspect of something. Snap back, look at the larger picture, and see what actually happens in the real world. Simon Darley asks, brother, do you have any good exercises to strengthen the lower back muscles? I've pulled mine a few times lifting my 2-year-old up. This kind of issue can sometimes be a form thing rather than a particularly kind of weak muscle. For instance, it's that old health and safety advice of bending your knees, keeping your spine neutral, not rounding your back in order to pick up. You're kind of there making your back do the work that your glutes should be doing, driving your hips through. But in terms of actual exercises to help strengthen the big phasic, dynamic movement muscles, things like deadlifts and the variations, hyperextensions as well. And then in terms of the tonic kind of stabilizer, like postural muscles, things like the Superman is good, where you're down in the quadruped position and you extend opposite arm and leg out, in front and to the back, bring the back, and then you switch the other way. That kind of brings a lot of tone and stamina to the lumbar region. Mark J asks, if someone were on a budget, what's some of the most bang for the buck foods to get your nutrition in? I made a list on my phone to save me time having to think about it when I'm filming. So bags of pulses such as lentils, beans, split peas, sacks of rice, dried pasta, frozen veg, berries and other fruits. Dried fruits such as dates and raisins. You can look for wonky produce or produce near its sell-by date. Red cabbage has the most antioxidants relative to cost, so that's a good one to buy fresh. Dried herbs and spices add a lot of antioxidants and other nutrients, and the top spice being amla powder, which is powdered Indian gooseberry, has the most antioxidants of any food in the world. So a little teaspoon of that in your porridge or like a big sweet smoothie. You won't taste it, it is minging, but you won't taste it in there. And just antioxidants out the wazoo. Patrick Nicol asks, I'm a hard gainer and need about 5,000 calories to gain muscle. What's your opinion on bumping the fats up to 1.5 grams per kilo? Otherwise, it's too hard for me to eat all that in whole foods. So it's possibly not as healthy as a lower fat diet, as I alluded to earlier, which is espoused by the plant-based doctors that are preventing, treating and reversing disease. I do feel your pain though, and it's actually something that I'm considering doing next bulk to make things easier on myself. Very good that you're whole foods plant-based, so you'll know to avoid oils and things, and you'll be selecting the nuts, seeds and avocado, that sort of healthful fats. One thing I'd caution for would be to watch total saturated fat intake. If an athlete weighing 100 kilos reached your target with only eating peanuts or peanut butter, which I could imagine someone doing, they'd be getting nearly 20 grams of saturated fat. Do the same with almonds and you'd only be reaching just a little bit over half that. Omega-3 and 6 balance could become an issue. Omega-3 being anti-inflammatory, 6 being pro-inflammatory. Optimally for a vegan, possibly like a 1-to-1 ratio may be best. Some people advocate going up to 4-to-1 in favor of 6, but any more than that, can cause you problems in making DHA from the short chain omega-3 ALA. Perhaps you can offset that by taking a DHA supplement. But what I would do, and what I do currently, is I eat quite a large amount of brown flax and chia seeds, which are higher in omega-3. So when you add in your other nuts and seeds and they're more omega-6, then the net result is that you're relatively balanced anyway. Jim Longman asks, when cutting, how do you best fit cardio around weight training? Optimally, I'd do them on different days, alternating between the two. Failing that, perhaps 1 a.m, a feed or two in between, and then the other session p.m. Failing that, if you need to do them in the same session, then always resistance training first, followed by cardio. If you do it the other way round, you're going to burn your blood sugar off doing your cardio, then you come to do your weights and you're going to be weak, you're not going to do very well. Whereas if you do your weights first, you're burning off your blood sugar with all the contractions. So by the time you get to your cardio, you're actually more likely to tap into your fat stores and actually burn some fat off instead of just burning your glycogen. So that's a very good strategy. And finally, Greg Patterson asks, I want to lose weight and build muscle. Which shall I do first? Generally speaking, I would invite the client to decide, they know what's more important to them. Do they want to look lean? Do they want to grow muscle? The only time I'll kind of really chime in is perhaps for a more overweight person, perhaps dangerously so. In that case, I would say target the fat loss till you get down to sort of a reasonable, healthy size where you're not risking, lots of disease. One final little tidbit, I would say one of the biggest mistakes I see in the gym is people flip-flopping between cutting and bulking like too regularly, and in that way you never really get anywhere. Stick with one for a decent amount of time till you're reasonably happy with how things are, and then switch to the opposite protocol, and kind of dial it in that way. Click this video and you'll feed some hungry cats. I've got 2 and they're eating me out of house and home.